And we are back after some hiccups and some problems with all the streaming infrastructure here. You wouldn't believe it. The streaming platform also was capped. Everything is going peculiar today. So I hope that everything goes great now with the promised talk that we have with Topo. Thank you very much, Topo. Mind you sharing your name because I don't want to butcher it.
Oh no, I'll go with it. My actual name is Tapabrata Pal. My last name is
Prahoy?
Pal, Pal.
PL. Wow.
I go by Topo, and I don't know where it came from. From my childhood, I've been used to
Oh,
being called Topo, except my parents. So
interesting.
yes.
Cool back origin story for the nickname. But yeah, I was curious and I didn't want it. Tapabrata?
Yep, you got it. Very good.
Okay.
Very good.
Um, it's a coffee. It's starting to kick in after lunch. Topo, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have the opening keynote presenter for Agile and DevOps West.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Takewell, and you doing this. So really appreciate it. Really honored.
It's such a pleasure and an honor. So first, for the audience that are watching us, do you mind sharing who you are, what are you doing, and what's your
Absolutely.
story and any other detail that you would like to
Yes.
add?
So right now I'm with Fidelity Investments as one of the vice president in presidents in Enterprise Architecture Group, and I focus on DevOps domain architecture, and I also run open source program office. That's quite a lot. But before that, I was with Capital One, and I spent about 10 years at Capital One, and I was deeply engaged with all the Capital One digital transformation that you might have heard about so far. So essentially, hands-on keyboard developer, open source
Oh, cool.
contributor, and I do like to go to conferences like these and talk to people and talk about my work in the past, in the present, in the future that's coming out to be. Uh, and I also wrote a book on audit compliance in DevOps. It's called Investments Unlimited.
Okay.
You can look it up on Amazon. And if you get hold of the book, read it and give me feedback.
Check Amazon, take a look for the book, and sounds really interesting. When you mentioned that you're a contributor on open source projects, what projects are you contributing to?
So I actually was fortunate enough to launch my own open source product
Oh,
called
cool.
Hygia DevOps Dashboard while being at Capital One.
Huh.
So mine was the first contribution to open source from Capital One as a company. Uh,
Nice.
it sounds easy, but it is really, really difficult to open source anything from a large enterprise, specifically from a financial industry
Oh, yeah.
company. So the main goal was to actually go through the process, make that happen as a part of digital transformation processes. And then and the main part of open sourcing that was it had nothing to do with banking. It was a DevOps dashboard, DevOps
Yeah.
analytics, easy to sell to risk and audit and compliance people, and also gave me the exposure to open source a lot more than I had before.
Oh. Do you have it as a repository or?
Yes, so github.com/Hygia.
Okay, take a look.
Yep. I don't
Uh,
maintain it anymore. The Capital One folks do. But if you have any questions or if you want to know anything more or what's going to happen in the future with that project, I can speculate on that.
Spoil it a little bit. You mentioned dashboarding for DevOps. What type of things are you showing in your dashboards?
So one of the problems that we had at Capital One when we started is how do I tell which team is doing what? So we basically said that to be at some place with DevOps, your technical capability, you need to have certain things, and we listed those out, and we presented that in a dashboard. And the data came actually from the systems, for example, from your code repository, from your build system, from your static code analysis, from your testing environment, from your deployment environment. We kind of collected data and threw it up on the dashboard in terms of widget. So one widget could be your Jira story, how many stories you are working on. It could be from your code repository, how many commits are happening, who is committing, what was the last merge, and all that from your build. So idea was that if you could fill up all the widgets on a dashboard, then you are actually doing good. you have started up. You just had the Jira story and nothing else. That means all you have is Jira. If you have Jira story lit up, Jira widget lit up, and the code repository lit up, that means at least you are using source control and you are committing for your Jira story, so on and so forth. So if you can complete all of these steps, you are kind of doing some automation in your DevOps transformation. But that's just the start.
Oh wow! So it's deeper than that. It's very interesting that you're attacking so many levels and metrics that are important for DevOps teams to be up to date, to have all the releases, repositories, commits, all the things that are
Yeah,
happening. Sounds super interesting. I am very curious and invite everyone to take a look. Probably I will be browsing through it.
sure.
I will try to add a link later to the description of the video or wherever you're watching, because this is a great effort. What prompted you to start trying it, or what was the eureka moment, like, I should start an open source project?
So I always used open source in my life.
Hmm.
And then when I landed at Capital One, we at Capital One, and I'm talking about Capital One 10, 12 years ago. It was a different Capital One. And the main idea in that environment was kind of don't use open source. So say no to open source. A lot of pushbacks on using open source, even though,
Lots of financial and regulated institutions
yeah,
are in that.
yeah. The funny thing is that all these years, people like then Capital One said no to open source. However, most of their tech stack, if you look at it, was based on open source. All the IDEs that they use was open source, and it was all open source all over the place, including their operating systems. Yet it was funny to say that I don't use open source, we don't want to use open source, that's too risky.
Huh.
So as a part of that transformation, I myself drove a lot of processes automation into using open source in a safe way. At the same time, we realized that without telling anyone or without even acknowledging that we use a lot of open source. Everybody used open source. And guess what? Some people actually modified open source and put in their own source code repository because there was some bug that they need to
External or internal in the
internal
organization?
repository, right? The question was that creates a problem by itself, because as soon as you modify and don't contribute back upstream, then you are stuck in time. Not only stuck in time, you are not going to get upgrades, but if there is a security vulnerability, then it's on you to fix that. So that creates a lot of problem in the DevOps transformation or CI/CD pipeline itself, because all my dependencies are resolved against these upstream repositories like Maven Central, PyPy, NPM, and so on and so forth. So if you made a change and kept it to yourself, it becomes yours, and it's kind of a technical debt from that point onwards. So then my idea was that all these changes needed to go back to upstream projects so that we can consume from the upstream repositories. Now, to make that happen, it's not easy task in a large enterprise, especially in the financial industry. So, to make a point, we pushed hard on contributing to open source, and we did that. And the next step was, well, since we can contribute to open source, let also open source some of our own projects, and that became one of the first projects. And then we did Cloud Custodian, which is also have a commercial offering these days,
Huh.
not from Capital One, but from a different company.
So you've been playing around and out of necessity. I think many of the open source projects come out of necessity, right?
Yes. Yep. Yep. Out of necessity, the contribution process had to be opened up. And there is other philosophical reasons, like all these big enterprises, they have been using open source. They actually are built on open source. If I look at any Java stack today, I can guarantee almost that 90% code is actually from open source.
How many of them don't have Linux in the backend and all the OSs? That's open source.
That's all open source. Now, isn't it a responsibility from big corporations and enterprises that are making money out of open source project not contribute
Oh,
back?
that's a good point.
That's a good philosophical thing. The other thing is that do we know who are managing these open source tools, right? So let's say Log4j happens again. Where is your risk
Ooh.
posture on Log4j? That itself is a big question, because well, I'm getting all this software free, but are they really free? Number one, and number two, if there is something happens, who is responsible for fixing that? So I think it's time that big enterprises realize that and have a say or have a stake or have a partnership in these big open source projects.
Yeah, because so many of these, it's a double-edged sword. Because with a commercial product, probably they find a vulnerability. No one says anything until they fix it. Here's a release. No one knows what happened. But with open source projects, it's like, hey, everyone, there's a vulnerability, which is good that people will start patching it and attacking it. But it's bad as well because, oh yeah, we had that vulnerability. No, we yeah, I see some of the. It's a double-edged sword. Open source is incredible,
Yep.
but especially and I see financial institutions and some regulated medical institutions that are details that you better not be compromised. uh, it's interesting, but I would say even with commercial products you get some of those situations, so it's not like it's the panacea of solutions. And it's really interesting that you just went hands on, like, hey, we have this necessity, we like you like open source, uh, we are ready. And that's another like clarity or a declaration, standing up, lifting your hand, and hey, I'm a bank and I have open source or something like that.
Yeah, and it's almost impossible these days to run any kind of transformation without using open source.
Not all the commercial applications solve you for everything. You're always gonna get a plugin or something that.
Yep. Hmm.
And on those situations, it's it's really cool that you had that initiative to go and create this. But I'm curious as well for your origin story, because you're saying you have been all your life pro open source, and that brings me to questions. How did you start it in IT and like playing with computers or and open source? Because it sounds like you are really super open source person.
Yes. So how did I start? I my background is in physics. So I had
Oh,
done
cool!
masters in physics and then PhD in semiconductor physics.
Wow.
And as a part of my PhD thesis and later on some other research around nanomaterials and all that, I did a lot of coding to simulate systems and all this coding. And I'm going to show my age right now. A lot of Pascal and C coding. So I always did coding, but that coding is completely different from the coding that happens in large enterprises. So that for that sort of coding in research, I am the product owner, I am the designer, I am the coder, I am the tester, and I am the consumer of the results of those programs or whatever. But it's completely different here. Now, I did have a career change from academics to IT, and that's completely a different story. But since
I can see from physics how that jump happened.
yeah, a lot of people do actually jump.
Have a few friends like using Mathematica. What's the company?
Mhm. Ulfram,
Fortran,
Ulfram.
Wolfram,
Hmm.
and you can. Mathematica is a programming
Yeah,
platform,
yeah,
pretty much,
yeah.
and that's like you're already there. If you're using Mathematica for physics, you are already a programmer,
Right.
pretty much.
So yeah, so that took me to IT in an easier way that I could at least code.
Hmm.
Uh, Now, when I started coding, mostly it was open source, right? Like, well, in the initial days, you had to buy the compiler, you had to buy the IDE and all that stuff. But as soon as Java hit the market, then, it's all
You're
opened
on
up.
your own.
Right. So I started coding in Java and then, started getting into Java development and all that. So my main background in coding is C and then Java. And that's why the whole open source thing came in. Java itself is open source. All Java libraries are open source. Runtime is open source. The IDE to develop Java is open source. I could not use open source.
And you say C and CC, just
Yeah, just
plain C.
plan C. Yes,
Wow.
on.
Memory allocations and all those fun things that we used
Yes,
to.
yes.
Oh,
Those
wow.
are the old days.
No, yeah, I remember memory overflow. You don't
Yeah,
have the right
yeah.
pointer. Put
You
it
have to
like,
write your own linked list. Imagine that.
yeah, the LIFOs and FIFOs and all the
Yes,
things that we
yes,
were.
yes.
Those were the good days.
Yeah.
You just
Now, if you think about Java, Java was created for non-programmers.
Yeah,
And now think about where it went from non-programmers to all programmers.
ironically, right?
Ironically, right? So there have been a lot of many efforts happened in the past that was designed or generated to address the issue that, hey, we don't need programmers to write programs. We need business people to write programs.
It's funny because that's something that is being still chased. Like I wouldn't say Java was so simple from the beginning, uh, and nowadays we have some programming languages that are supposed to be like more
Right,
for people, right?
right.
Do you think we are ever gonna get there? Like anyone can?
Well, so now we are getting into chat GPTs.
Oh, that's a, oh wow, yeah.
So that itself is a
All the time,
differentiation.
ChatGPT has to show up in these
So
conversations.
so
Why?
yes, so yeah, I did experiment with ChatGPT. It's phenomenal. So yes, so if business users can prompt ChatGPT the right way or learn how to prompt, yes, probably you don't need developers.
I think you still need some because ChatGPT won't always like give me a code for Hello World and add a 1+1. You need to babysit it.
You do need to babysit
Someone
it.
needs to check.
Yes.
I think it's gonna assist big time.
Yeah, but it's going to change pretty fast as things are going along. I mean, everybody's experimenting, and I've seen some talks, and I experimented myself. I actually gave it a public internet site. I'm not going to name the site, and asked ChatGPT to generate me Selenium Cucumber test cases,
Hmm.
and it did it. For the most part, it did work.
For the most.
For the most part, and the part it did not work was not quite chat GPT's fault. But if you train the model in a way, I'm pretty sure it will come someday when, all the software engineers are now prompt engineers.
There's yeah, because if you have like a prompt, hey, I need a design for this, then you plug it to DALI and get some images and even generate a video and put everything together. You can have and replace a Topo and me here having this
Yeah,
interview,
yeah,
plugging
yeah.
one to the other.
Yeah. I mean, I told ChatGPT, hey, I need a Python program that connects to a Postgres database and does some crowd operations. Give me the code. And it actually did. So,
I have done some of those experiments. If you have some tasks that are complex enough, or what's the name of these things, the hallucinations that often it will have. If you are if you don't know what you are getting, is in my opinion, it's as dangerous as just blindly copy and pasting
no,
code
it's not. Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the internet.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I have some friends that copy and pasted and programmed in big institutions code from what's the name of this site that has
Stack Overflow.
Stack Overflow, and it was not 100% benign code, and they ended up putting something bad. So be careful of what ChatGPT, Stack Overflow, or whatever you have in terms of code, because uh, I like when you can enable people that are outside of your environment
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
start to create, but eventually start learning it so that you know what you're getting. Don't always trust like microwaving everything, and
Right.
some things are not to be done. But okay, we have been talking a little bit about open source and your origin story, and all this has been really interesting and fascinating. And to find out that you are Dr. Topo, not only
Yes.
Topo, that's really cool. It's something, I mean, silly for me. I'm a superhero kid. It's like all the heroes are a doctor or something. It's really. I think you should present yourself like that.
I'll think about it. Thank you.
It's silly. But speaking of presenting, you gave the opening keynote, and it's already out there. I already shared with the audience, like you can watch it and subscribe to the channel of the conference. But for the ones that have not been able to watch it, would you mind spoiling it? And what were you talking about on the
So
keynote?
the topic of my talk was DevOps from large enterprises point of view. And why large enterprises? Couple of reasons. One is I spend most of my IT career in large enterprises, so I have kind of seen the sausages being cooked up close and
Oh,
personal.
those sausages.
And then the second reason is I think DevOps in large enterprises become very interesting and challenging. and it's a good problem to solve, especially on within from within enterprises that are regulated. Because it's one thing to deliver functionalities like, hey, I'm posting my messages and didn't show up. Okay, think about your money transaction, and the money transaction you did for, let's say, $10, and it came out to be $9.99. You'll be like jumping up and down all day long, right? So there's a huge difference between those two scenarios. So when we talk about delivering new features faster than anything, like 10 times a day or things, there are real risks that people need to think about. It's not just delivering update. Oh, I dropped 5 messages from my whatever social network I use, right? It's different. So the risks are real, they are different, and the regulations are actually real, and they are there for a reason. So there are a lot of things that needs to be considered, being in a large enterprise and regulated enterprises before you do these kind of things. So I think it's very interesting to be in a large enterprise and talk about delivering high quality software faster, right?
On your presentation, what were did you give any recommendations? What were the
Yes,
main
I
ones?
actually went through certain problems that large enterprises face. For example, every large enterprises that have been here for a while have legacy systems.
Ooh.
They actually
Ouch.
have a problem with being large. There are so many different teams, and they have their own choices of tools and technologies that they want to use.
Silly question. Do you still deal with the COBOL backends and all those big things that?
Every large enterprise that are regulated will have some form of it, more or less. They will all have that. Now, the question is, how do you handle that? Do you still deliver as fast as you deliver for a website? Probably not.
No,
Don't even think about
they are not built for
it.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's
Even if they are built for that, there are other regulations, policies, standards that will prevent you from doing that. Uh, there are actually written in contracts in some of these things that if you change anything, you have to give 6 months notice to the
oh
customer,
wow.
because those are very, very, very critical systems that are
Picture
dealing with.
keeping that with sprints 6 months in advance.
Yes, and then you go in and, hey, why are you releasing every 6 months? So you should be releasing every 6 hours, right? That's not going to happen, no matter how much you push it.
Yeah.
So so those are the interesting things, and then the other thing is security audit compliance, which is my book about, and then there are other challenges like metrics and measurements.
That's another
What do
big
you
one.
measure? How do you measure? What does it mean to measure something?
What is relevant in this context? What is relevant in the other one?
Right,
That's
right.
huge.
Yes. So those are the challenges that big enterprises face, and then I've been dealing with this for 10 plus years now. So I have some my own point of view, my own opinion, as well as I learn from other people around this community that are actually working at large enterprises to see what they have done, how did they solve this problem. So it's all kind of gathered knowledge plus experience knowledge put together in one in my talk today.
And we're starting like the ramp down to close this interview. But you just got me curious. What would be recommendations that you would give to the audience that are dealing in some of these situations?
Yes. So one question that I face everywhere, right? Actually, two. I'll
Just
bring
bring it
two
on, bring it on.
true to how do we start,
Uh huh.
and then uh, what can I do to implement my DevOps transformation? And both are kind of very interesting questions. One thing that I keep saying is that build your own DevOps, meaning don't copy anybody else,
Yeah.
because every DevOps transformation, every enterprise is unique by itself. For example, if you say that, hey, Google puts all their code in one big monorepo, and so we should, that's not going to happen. That may or may not work with you. And you can always say, hey, look, Capital One is a financial institute. They are all in cloud. Let's go all in cloud. It may not happen. So don't blindly copy anybody else. And then also I also believe in that same train of thought that there is no agile on a page. There is no DevOps in a box. You have to understand the landscape yourself and understand your company technology stack, your
Mhm.
company culture, your company's business, your company's team structure, your company's geographical locations, and all these things to consider what kind of transformation you need to start or develop your transformation plan.
So many of those, when you mention geographical, yeah, that's another. Are you in the European regulations or here in the US, South America? There are so many things. And I love that you said that DevOps, Agile is not out of the box. It's not like one size fits all. It's tailor suited. Like you may have broader shoulders in your organization, a little bit wider here, like us, and you need it specifically for your needs, for your location, for your
Yep,
team, your technology. Don't try to have it like my neighbor did or like Google did. Or
exactly.
I love that
And then
recommendation.
the other thing is, how do we start? And it's interesting, everybody says, well, culture is the first thing to start with. I'm like, try changing culture in a big enterprise and tell me how it goes. uh, a lot of times you'll see, new leaders come into a large enterprise, or consultants come into a large enterprise. Hey, we are here to change culture. It's not going to happen. People will look at you like, you don't know our company, you don't know what you're talking about. Instead of that, try in small scale and be a catalyst of a small change and show what you have achieved, and then people will buy into it, because people in general, as human beings, we love success. We get attracted to success. So as soon as you show success in a small scale, by the nature of it, it will just grow. If it does not grow, then it's not a success,
Yeah.
right? So I say, start with a catalyst mindset instead of being a culture change agent in a large enterprise.
It's very interesting because a large enterprise is like an elephant. And how do you eat an elephant? One little bite at a time.
Yep.
And if it gets interesting, the rest is gonna start biting the elephant. And hopefully that's a very good recommendation. Show it up in a corner a little bit and let the people see
Yep.
that
Yep.
you are successful. Awesome recommendations, Topo. I really appreciate. Thank you so much for coming and sharing
Thank you.
the knowledge, your experience, and it has been such a pleasure to have
Thank you so much. And
Dr.
again,
Topo with us.
really, really appreciate, and I'm really honored to be here.
No, it's
Thank
it's
you.
my pleasure. And everyone, this was our amigo Topo, keynote speaker for opening the conference, the whole conference. So take a look. I think there are recordings on the platform for Agile and DevOps West. So that's it for now. We will keep some other streams. We fixed some of the problems that we had earlier, so we will have some more walkarounds later. There are so many more awesome people around here. We'll stay tuned. And with that, Topo, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure. And with that, Señor Performo out. And we'll get right.